Now, okay, so we've zoomed right in. Okay, we see that the space, both the fluid within the cells and the fluid without, around the cells, the neurons, is all made out of this dissolved salt water. But if we were to look very carefully, of course, I'm showing you here very static pictures. You have to imagine, of course, that there's a lot of movement going on. Right? These water molecules would actually be pushing around and being moved around at rapid speed. And the reason for this is relatively simple. It's heat. Okay? If you have a substance that is either liquid or a gas, then it's liquid or gaseous because all the molecules are constantly moving and don't stay in their place. And the hotter the substance get, the faster they move. All right, and this leads to constant mixing about. All right, so here I've got a little video, a little animation that I made. Imagine these are lots of little molecules, and here are lots of big molecules. And now we turn up the temperature, and they melt and they go off. What would it actually look like? So I'm going to get the movie to work. All right, it would look a bit like this. All right, of course they get moved about, they bounce into each other. And they end up, even though they started off each in just a particular place, they end up distributed all over the place. This is known as diffusion. Okay, so if you have, if you put sugar in a tea, all right, and you leave the sugar lump at the bottom, initially all the sugar is just going to be at the bottom. But if you come back 2 hours later, the sugar is going to be all over. It's going to be all through the tea. The hotter the tea is, the quicker you're going to get it mixed all over. The thing that I would also want to, so the individual molecules, the smallest molecules, may actually be bouncing around at average velocities in the order of hundreds of kilometers an hour. On the very smallest scale, your brain or any part of your body actually is a very violent place, okay, with water molecules bashing into each other 100 kilometers an hour. But the other thing that I would like to kind of point out to you is here on average, no two of the molecules move at the same speed. Why would they? They bash into other things that may accelerate them or slow them down. But actually the smaller molecules tend to move on average much faster than the large ones, which is perhaps not surprising. The big heavy ones, if you imagine a truck and a bicycle colliding, the impact on the bicycle is going to be much larger than on the truck, isn't it? So if you have very small molecules bashing at very high speed into a very, very large molecule, it's not going to make a huge dent on the large molecule, but it's going to make a big dent on the small molecule. The other thing that I would like you to take away from this diffusion, this tendency for there to be just random motion, which comes about by heat, right, is perhaps the most important driving force for all activity in your brain. Okay, your brain is powered, and this is also perhaps a kind of a weird thought. Your brain is powered by random noisy churning. All right, water churning in your brain cells, and by this churning, pushing salt ions around, and also bumping into other molecules we're beginning to talk about. And of course, the fact that this sort of randomness is really what makes brains, is one of the key things that make brains operate, I think is actually kind of interesting, because we tend to think of ourselves as also rational, and if you calculate 2 + 2 in your head over and over and over again, hopefully you'll always come up with the answer 4. But of course that's not really what our brains are about, is it? I mean, there's just if there's a lot of randomness going on in your brain, maybe that's entirely natural. All right. And of course you can make it all less natural by cooling it down. But what's going to happen to a brain if you cool it down? Well, what happens if you have a bruise and it hurts and you put an ice bag on it? It makes it numb, doesn't it? The reason is that it makes it numb is because you're going to slow down all the molecules in the nerve cells on your skin, and as soon as you cool them down, as soon as you just make them just a little bit less fast, less bounced into, they can no longer do what they normally do, and the nerves will just, So cold is actually a very powerful anesthetic, because if you just cool the nervous system down far enough, it will stop functioning. Okay, it needs this sort of constant motion of heat. So we've got now our water, okay, which is full of electrically charged ions bouncing this way and that, and thereby producing electrical currents that go this way and that. But of course, if you've got, positively charged ions going one way and then negatively charged ions going the other way, on average, it's all going to cancel out. You're not really going to get an electrical current that can carry a signal in a systematic way. We somehow need to get some order into this. All right, we need to make sure that any electrical currents that we get by ions that are bouncing around in this water need to be channeled in a sensible way. And the way nerve cells do this is they use fat, all right, to do this. The thing about fat is that it doesn't mix with water. All right. So why doesn't fat mix with water? Well, fat is basically made out of hydrocarbon chains. So we've got long molecules here, okay, typically in the order of, 12 to 20 carbon atoms, each with lots of little hydrogen atoms, forming these sort of long chains. And these fatty acid molecules, as they're known, these sort of long chains of carbon atoms with hydrogen on them, unlike the water, will distribute their electrons very fairly and very evenly among them, so they're not polar. Okay, so this mutual attraction that one water molecule has to another water molecule, they don't share with fat. They just sort of they become kind of uninterested in the fat. All right, but fat, most fats in the body will be made out of these chains of so-called fatty acids, all right, where you basically got lots of carbon atoms lined up, and then on the top you got a so-called carboxy group. We really don't need to worry about the details here. Okay, now this is a carboxy group, but it basically just allows these things to become cross-linked, so I can have several of these chains stuck together, all right, with a little glycerol here at the top. So the fat that we all have too much of, well, not all of us, but certainly me, has a little bit too much of around the midriff. This will actually be made out of 3 fatty acid chains linked together on a glycerine at the top. But the fat that we're particularly interested from the point of view of understanding what neurons do are so-called phospholipids. All right. So the idea is you've got 2 fatty acids, okay, and then you've got a phosphate group here with a little choline at the top. So what does that do? Well, this phosphate actually itself is an ion. It's negatively charged because it's given off, because it's taken on an extra electron, one more than it's allowed. Okay, well, allowed one more than it would normally be allowed to have, simply based on the number of protons in it. And then you've got a choline at the other, which is also an ion. In this case, a positively charged ion. So we've got stuff here that's very, exercises very strong electric attraction to water molecules, and then we've got bits that have no interest for water molecules whatsoever. So we've got a so-called hydrophobic, water-fearing, or water repellent part to this molecule, and we've got a water-attracting part to this molecule. And if I just have enough of these molecules, these phospholipids, then and I put them in water, they'll automatically line themselves up like this to form a phospholipid bilayer, all right, where they basically just put all the water-attracting head regions out towards the water, and all the ones that are, the water-repellent parts, they just line up against each other. So I end up with just a thin layer of fat. And these thin layers of, this thin layer of fat, which is really only 2 molecules thick, all right, is the lining of all the cells in your body. All right, they're all lined with these phospholipids, which is why, no matter how, diet obsessed you may or may not be, you need some fat in your body. You need to be able to line every cell in your body with these lipids, or else your body will break down, because it needs that in order to be able to control the flow of liquid and the flow of ions, dissolved salts, around your body, because this now provides a barrier. Okay. Bear in mind here we've got our water molecules here bashing around, but these molecules are pretty big, okay, and they're stuck together in this sort of conformation that it's actually pretty solid. So if the water molecules bounce into this, they'll just bounce back. And any ions that they carry with them in this hydration shell similarly will not be able to be, pushed through here. So suddenly I have sort of a material that allows me to channel the way, the flow that ions can take in my brain. I can send it down. I can basically make sort of big tubes out of this, all right, which forms like little cables through which I can send the electric current. And it's really tubes like this which are the axons and the dendrites of the neurons that we've seen earlier, all right. So we've basically got these neurites, as they're collectively known, are tubes made out of these phospholipid bilayers, so we can have ions on one side and different ions on the other side. Right. And this is just sort of to just see which way I should tell you about this. All right. So the thing is, okay, one thing just quickly to mention before I introduce another important player, which is the proteins. I told you about salt forming ions and getting dissolved, all right? And of course, salts, we normally think sodium chloride, all right? And sodium chloride is perhaps the most important salt, in neuroscience, but it's very, just as important actually is potassium, all right? Potassium salts. And calcium salts are also very, very important. So you can basically get so-called cations, which are positively charged ions. Sodium, potassium, calcium are the ones that we're going to, hear more about. And then anions, sort of negatively charged ions. We've got chloride, and we've got so-called organic anions. All right. What does organic mean? It doesn't mean that it's grown by a farmer who likes to use less pesticides or something. Okay, what organic means really literally just means it's made out of hydrocarbons. Okay, the word organic already had a meaning for hundreds of years, which means hydrocarbon chemistry, effectively. So we'll introduce you to some organic anions next. All right, we've already actually, in a way, okay, because the organic anions that we are interested in here are so-called proteins.